Hello and welcome to my discussion of When Evil Lurks, or in Spanish, Cuando acecha la maldad. Also, I'm sorry if my eye contact is like all over the place. My glasses, I can't figure out how to avoid the reflections. So I'm just going blind. I'm trying to look in the general right direction, but I might at times just be looking into the void. Okay, so When Evil Lurks was a 2023 horror film, sort of post-apocalyptic with a little bit of demonic elements, but also sort of viral body horror aspects to it, and also psychosis. So a little bit of inspiration also in that vein from the Crazies, but with a demonic influence as opposed to a biological agent. It was a joint Argentinian-U.S. production, written and directed by Demian Rugna, and obviously it's a Spanish language film. Okay, so for the first section, I don't want to do any spoilers. I just kind of want to keep it vague in general, but I want to bust out of the gate with if I had to assign a score, I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. And I actually have it on video from my first, when I was watching it. I don't think that I'm going to put up a full, edited reaction video, but I might put some snippets in the spoiler section, just because there were some moments that were genuinely jaw-dropping. I think I would still say, out of 2023 horror movies, it's probably the best one I watched, but I didn't watch many movies that came out in 2023, especially not too many horror movies. Usually I'm a horror lover, but I don't know, 2023 was just kind of a blur for me. I ended up just watching a lot of YouTube and just sort of existing, but I'm trying to sort of get back into the swing of things, start to, come back to life a little bit. Now, keeping it vague, I'd say that the primary reasons why I settled on 7.5 is because, in my opinion, this film suffers from something that is difficult for many films. And I'm not a filmmaker. I don't have a filmmaking background, so I'm not going to be overly critical, because I sure as shit could not do better. But in my opinion, the film sort of falls off the cliff right before the third act. I think that the first and the second acts are just wonderful. They have great atmosphere. It's sort of like a bare bones, less is more, that then gets just overwhelmed by these flashes of just sensory overload. Definitely going to have more details on that in the spoiler section. If you know, you know. So I'd say the first and the second acts benefit from having this more, I would say overall, a more contained narrative. I mean, there's still a sense of scope, but the stakes still feel relatively contained to the characters that we're sort of interacting with, or not interacting with, but that we're witnessing on screen. But by the third act, where I think it falls a little short, is in scope. So in my opinion, I don't know for sure, but in my opinion, there was sort of an exposition dump, and I'm trying not to spoil it, but a little bit of an exposition dump to justify why, even though the scales were reaching apocalyptic portions expositionally, the film ended up being set in a very, even by the film's prior, by the standards of the prior acts of the film, a very low budget location to finish to have the climax of the film. I really think that this film was held back in that sense by budgetary restraints, or just restraints of production scope. That's not the fault of the film. I think that other than just that climax location, I think that this film did so much with so little. I don't know what the official budget of the film is, but I would guess it was very conservative. But the film is still very well shot for the most part. Still has very impactful scenes of violence, and especially, I don't know how they pulled it off, but a lot with violence that was happening to children on screen. A lot of it is very convincing. The way that either CGI is mixed in with really realistic body props and dummies and camera scene switching, it all looks very, very beyond its budget. Another thing that I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of But that's just a personal thing, and I don't really think it's that big of a deal. But for this film, a lot of the parameters and the rules are already known by the characters, and I felt like the way that they were conveyed to the viewer, to the audience, was done pretty well for the most part. At some points, the exposition dumping is just a little bit obvious, but overall, I'd say pretty well done there. It's just, I personally am not the biggest fan of disaster or apocalyptic type films where you just hop in and everyone already knows what's going on, or the issue is already like a well established plague on society that everyone just has to deal with, and they know that there are ground rules, and then the viewers just sort of like figuring it out. In that sense, it can be a little more stressful for the viewer to be the only one that doesn't know. But I'm someone where I tend to like try to connect a lot with the characters, the protagonists, and sometimes even the antagonists on screen. And so when they already know what's going on and I'm the one out of the loop, sometimes I have a hard time establishing that viewer to medium empathetic connection. And for me, that can make it a little bit harder to like really feel like I'm inside the film as well, if I'm the only one who doesn't know what's going on. But that's just a very small personal nitpick. Some positives. Let's keep it positive. I feel like the acting was really, really strong, except just for one moment that I thought was a little bit weak. I don't want to spoil it though. We'll cover that in the spoilers, but it's not spoiling if I just say the character's name, Mirta. I thought that the actress did a pretty good job, but like really like at the climax, prior to her very last moments on screen, I just thought it was a little weak, the stress acting. Yeah, otherwise, I thought that overall the cast was very solid, especially the kid actors. I thought that the actress that played Sabrina was pretty solid too, very menacing, and she had this vibe to her that I was trying to figure out when I was like watching it in real time. I feel like she looks a lot like young Shelley Duvall, and so I was really drawn to her as well. The makeup I felt like was really solid, especially considering this film probably had a conservative budget. The makeup and the props were really, really visceral, really gory, but not like over the top like a Saw movie or like an Evil Dead movie. It felt very organic and shocking and impactful, but there was still just and it was disgusting, a lot of it, but it still felt like there was a little bit of restraint at the same time. This film did a really great job with the balancing act for a lot of these things. I feel like the idea was also super, super promising. I also really liked the music a lot. Some of it, like, it wasn't given like full Last of Us, but just like a little bit. Like, I felt a little bit of a reminiscence with The Last of Us, which I find to be a very comforting music style and soundtrack. So for me, that was a plus for sure. Thematically, it was also pretty interesting. Like, you can tell that the idea of a supernaturally influenced plague of some sort is mirroring a lot of real world issues that are then failed by bureaucratic systems. And so people sort of know what's happening to them in the real world. Like when people are, here, let me just get right into it. So I actually, after finishing the movie, found a Polygon article that confirmed it. So the director and writer was talking about how the thematic inspiration for failure of bureaucracy was inspired by what's happening in his region where he's coming from. There are a lot of underpaid workers who are working large-scale commercial farms and being exposed to very dangerously high levels of pesticides and broadleaf herbicides. This was a very small nitpick, but he actually, he sort of had a brain fart. I don't know if he had a brain fart or if the translator had a brain fart, but they quoted him as saying that the people from his region who are laboring on these commercialized farms are being exposed to glyphosate, a pesticide. And I was like, oh no, no, I know what he's saying, and obviously if you were getting sprayed with glyphosate, that's not a good thing at all. But that killed me a little bit, because I brain fart too. I misuse words all the time as well, but it's just like when you're sort of in an interview setting, that's not the time when you want to be on record like calling an herbicide a pesticide when you're talking about like how this was the inspiration for your film. So I was just, my heart went out, because I was like, I'm sure I do that like 100 times a day. But the point was, these people, like, society knows that they are being afflicted with cancers and chronic illnesses because they're trapped in this like almost caste system where it's sort of like circular logic almost, where it's like, because they need this job, but this job is so underpaying that they don't have the mobility to ever like get out or to advocate. And the government and people who are not negatively impacted by that situation just kind of turn a blind eye, because they don't view it as like worth the resources to advocate for these people on a legislative level in terms of protecting them now and making amends for damage that has been done because they were allowed to be harmed in this way. That was like the core like foundation for the thematic elements of When Evil Lurks, because these people, they're basically abandoned by all of the systems that are in place that could help them. All the systems that could help them have decided that it's just not worth the resources to try to help this region. You know, this region can literally go to hell, and you know the bureaucratic systems that are in place to address this disintegration of society are like, you know, your guys' town and county wasn't even that special anyway. So we're better off just kind of trying to keep the city stable the best we can. You know, you guys probably only have like a couple thousand people in your, you know, tri-county area anyway. So who cares if your all's region or neck of the woods just literally burns to the ground? It is what it is. Good luck. Best of luck. That's sort of what happens. So the film really is relevant in that regard. But at the same time, a lot of the pain, the pain of the narrative is still felt on a very localized, intimate level, because we become attached to a character named Pedro, and his life is just unending suffering, basically from the start of the film to the very last frame of live footage. He is just a walking embodiment of misery and loss. Some of my ideas are rooted in specific plot points and moments, so I am going to switch to the spoiler section now. I'm going to try to go from memory, because I have the Wikipedia page right here, but my vision is so bad, even though the screen is like 2 feet away. I literally cannot read that without glasses on. So we're just going to have to try to go from memory, go from recall. Okay, before I get right into the plot, I did want to say one more thing. It is driving me crazy that like a lot of people are using stills and snippets from the other Argentinian horror movie from a few years ago, Aterrados. They're using those stills for their YouTube thumbnails when they're talking about When Evil Lurks. I feel like that's really disrespectful to both films. They're very similar in some ways, but in other ways they're just so different. I actually have similar things that I liked and disliked about both of those films. That could be a discussion for another day, but I just wanted to put that out there. They are separate films. If you see the picture of the woman, like the bloody woman floating in the shower, that's not When Evil Lurks. That's Aterrados. If you see the one where it's like the corpse of the little boy who's like obviously like rotten and dead at a kitchen dining table, that's Aterrados. If you see the thing with the thing crawling out from under the bed, the bald humanoid thing, that's Aterrados. So just keep in mind, like, that is not When Evil Lurks. When Evil Lurks is a whole other beast. That actually just reminded me that I'm pretty sure that Smile took heavy inspiration from a body horror element from Alterados. Like, this might be a spoiler, but when in Smile, when she thinks that it's her sister, but then her like whole, like, from shoulders up just like collapses and is upside down. I'm pretty sure that borrowed heavily from Alterados, but again, that's a story for a whole other day. There's only so many ways that you can really wreck the shit out of a body, so it might just be a coincidence. Anyway, When Evil Lurks starts with two brothers, Pedro, who is the main protagonist, and Jaime, and they're living... Oh my god. Okay, let's try this shit again. So the film opens with Pedro, the main character, Jaime. They hear the gunshots in the early morning. They live in the outskirts of town, the middle of nowhere, like very rural. They go to investigate. They find the top part of a hand, like literally just like from the knuckles up, and the bottom half of a torso that has just been cut clean in half, but the top half is gone. And they find a bunch of like instruments, very ornate, ornamental, gears and stuff. Like, it looks like all these things assemble some sort of machine of some sort. And oddly enough, they aren't quite sure what the equipment is, but they know that a woman lives pretty close by to where the corpse is. One thing that's interesting, so now that we're in the spoiler section, the whole thing is demonic possession and different. So I have some personal theories about the different manifestations of the demonic possessions, but the point is that the whole world knows about it, that it's an established thing that this happens. And these are just like the new rules of society and the world at large. So I do find it odd that these two men just like wouldn't immediately know, like, oh my god, like, okay, this is cleaner, which is what they call the people that are sort of pseudo exorcists. They're really more like ritualistic murderers, but it's for the benefit of society at large. We'll get into that. Anyway, I'm going to save some of my inner monologues for the end. For now, they know that a woman, Maria Elena, lives nearby on the land. They thought that the guy, at first, they're trying to like rationalize, like, okay, this corpse that we found, maybe it was a puma that killed him. Maybe it's the landowner for this region, you know, who owns these land plots. Like, maybe he got killed by a puma when he was hunting it on his land. Maybe this is a guy that the landowner Ruiz killed, because maybe this guy was like trying to steal crops from Ruiz's land or something. Like, they're just coming up with all these ideas. But at the end of the day, they're like, okay, well, we know that Maria Elena lives nearby, so let's go visit her and see if she knows anything. So they go visit Maria Elena, and instantly they're like, what the fuck is that smell? And they go into her house, and so Maria Elena is an older woman. She has a son, so she looks like she's in her 50s, but like hard 50s, and looks like she has a son who might be in his like late 30s, early 40s, but then has another son who's like in his late teens. The older son is named Uriel, the one who's probably in his 30s or early 40s, and he is overtaken by one of the higher demons, and so he's transformed into what's called a rotten. So what's really interesting about this film, it has very interesting ideas and dynamics. So Uriel looks fucking disgusting. He's probably over 400 pounds, and his body is just, it looks like it's covered in cancerous growths that are rotting and infected at the same time. Pretty gnarly stuff. But the whole idea is that if you're a rotten, then you're actually in a way pregnant with the germinating physical embodiment of a pure demon. And so basically, if you stay in a rotten state to the point where the gestation completes, then like you will, in a sense, give birth to a pure higher demon, which the movie never really explains what happens if the higher demon is born, but presumably it would be an apocalyptic level event, like just end of times type of shit. So we learn that Maria Elena hired the cleaner that was bisected. She wanted the cleaner to come and ritualistically kill Uriel so that Uriel could finally be put to rest, and so that the demon could be vanquished without spreading the corruption. Because right now, even though like there's still this corrupting energy emanating from Uriel wherever he is, the pure demon evil is still relatively contained within him. We'll come back to that. So the brothers, Pedro and Jaime, they try to go to the police to basically be like, oh my God, like a cleaner. They literally explain, we found a cleaner who was fucking brutally like massacred, and just down the street, there's a rotten that's gestating a pure higher demon. Like, what the fuck? Like, we need help. Someone has to come and take care of this. We need another cleaner, and you guys need to, like, you police and authorities and government agencies that are aware of these demons and that this is happening, need to get him the hell out of town, because his corrupting influence is spreading. And the police are basically just like, not our problem, you know. Like if whoever sent the cleaner the first time, when they realize that their cleaner is dead and never came back, maybe they'll send another one, but like whatever, not our issue, good luck. So they're not even going to investigate the murder of the cleaner. And they're certainly not going to lay a finger on Uriel, who's germinating a higher demon. They're just like relieved themselves of it. So they go right to Ruiz, who's the landowner, and Ruiz is pissed. He shows up with a fucking rifle ready to just dome Uriel right in the head. But this is where we learn another really interesting dynamic. Maria Elena is begging him not to shoot Uriel, not because she's like, no, like don't hurt my baby, but because she's saying she establishes a rule that's sort of clarified later on, where she's like, no, like if you shoot him, then the evil will be released. By that, they don't mean that like the demon will be instantly born. What they mean, I think at this stage of the demon's development, is just like its incorporeal corruption and essence will just move into another body and start and become a rotten in another vessel. And so they need a cleaner to come and kill it ritualistically, because that's the only way to like seal it. If they just dome it in the head, the cycle will just continue. So Ruiz relents, but he's like, fine, if we're not gonna like blow his head off, then he can't be here. And so he enlists Pedro and Jaime, and they basically wrap Uriel up in a blanket, and then they drive 300 kilometers away from town. And at right around that point, there was a little boy on a bike in the road, and he's not paying attention. Ruiz is driving, he's not paying attention, and so he swerves to avoid hitting the boy. They just think it's a close call, but then they drive about 20 more minutes, and when they get to a dumping spot, they realize that Uriel's not in the bed of the truck. And so the lift gate was up and it had a cover, and keep in mind, remember, Uriel's like 400 pounds. So they surmise, oh, he must have like flown out of the truck when we almost ran over that little kid in the road. But so they're like, fuck it. You know, when we almost hit that kid, that was still 300 kilometers away from town. That's far as fuck. This fat blubber fuck. There's no way he's going to get back to town. So, you know, he's this province's issue now. So let's get the fuck out of here. And that's basically what they decide to do. Now, right in that moment, I was like, just the way that they show the slime on the truck and all this, I was like, he did not get blown up out of the truck. Like, he did not like fly off of the truck when they almost hit that kid. Like, he's been gone since like way, way before they took stock of like, where is this big fat blob? So they're just like out of sight, out of mind. And then the next day, Ruiz is pregnant. So Ruiz has a pregnant wife, and this is shown off screen, but it immediately makes it known the animals can get possessed. So one of the goats on their farm, she's like, "Oh my god, that goat is possessed! Like I just know it. I know it's possessed." And so Ruiz gets his gun and he lights off a warning shot, and so all of the normal goats spread away or disperse, but then the possessed goat, like this goat acting was on point. I've never seen a goat actor this impressive. This goat is just stoic and just slowly walks right up to the barrel of the rifle and puts its forehead right up, taunting, like, "Shoot me, bitch," because the guns inherently release the evil and spread it for some reason. That's just like a ground rule that's established. And so the wife is like, "No, like, you know the rules, like, you cannot shoot it with a gun." She goes and grabs an axe and is like, "If you're gonna kill it, like, at least use an edged weapon. You know that guns are the worst possible way to deal with this." And the husband just doesn't relent. She's having a nervous breakdown, so he blows the goat's brains out, and then just an absolute shocking moment. She just completely wrecks his face with the axe, and then slowly just starts axing herself in the face. So if you've seen the cover art for this film, it's that very haunting silhouette of the woman with the axe and the red background. That's that scene, and she does do it. It is very shocking and disturbing, especially because she's doing it slowly. So it's like the first hit, it's like half-hearted, you know? So it like just sort of like does this and does more like blunt damage to the eye, and she just keeps going and going, but she's doing it so slowly. And it's like she's just slowly pushing the axe into her face instead of actually like getting momentum and like whacking herself with it. So quick break, theory break, real quick. I wasn't sure, and I'm still not 100% sure, if the demon in the goat immediately hopped into the wife and then massacred the husband and herself via murder-suicide, if that demon like committed the murder-suicide. Or if the wife was genuinely so afraid of the consequences of releasing the demon via firearm that in a way, like maybe she viewed doing the murder-suicide, maybe that she viewed that as like the only way to save the souls of her husband, herself, and her unborn baby. I still think it's really odd, because you'd think if you were doing a murder-suicide, like axing the husband in the face, like, yeah, okay, like maybe if that were her like panicked solution, maybe that would be plausible. But the self-mutilation to the face with the axe, I just found that so unusual. Like, even if she were absolutely being driven by existential fear and terror, like, you'd think that she'd run into the house and like cut her wrists with a kitchen knife or something. So in that sense, I was like, okay, maybe there's like demonic influence going on. But quick, okay, this is spoiling something ahead. So later on, it's established that demons can murder someone, and then the influence can spread into that person, and their corpse is reanimated as a demonically possessed vessel. But Ruiz and his wife, after she axed both of them, it's established that they do not reanimate. They are found like a whole day later, exactly as they were when they died. So they never came back. So that small detail leads me to pivot just slightly in favor of it being the wife doing the murder-suicide out of fear, not because of demonic control or influence. Or if it was demonic influence, at the very least, it was not like a full possession. It was more of like an aura thing. But I think that it was her trying to, like, in a fucked up way, protect her family. That's just my personal theory. Let me know what you think below if you've seen the film. Okay, so then the next day, Jaime and Pedro are like, we have to get the hell out of here. So they split up. Jaime drops Pedro off at his ex-wife's house, and Jaime's like, okay, like, you know, we'll regroup I'm going to go get our mom. So the mom of Jaime and Pedro. So Jaime is out of the picture for the moment, and Pedro is literally at a house. And so he knocks on the door, and his ex-wife's new husband, Leonardo, opens the door and is basically like, you can't be here, because Pedro has a restraining order against him. So real quick. The ex-wife, Sabrina, Pedro and Sabrina got divorced, and it was like a nasty divorce because Pedro had a breakdown because he had two sons with Sabrina. Jair is the oldest son, and then Santino was like their younger son, the little baby. But Jair is high support needs, nonverbal, very touch sensitive, autistic. And so Pedro, as his marriage was dissolving and he was just very overwhelmed by, I guess, his life falling apart and the stress of, I guess, having a child with extremely high support needs, he put both of them in a car, in their family car in the garage, and like plugged up the exhaust pipe, presumably to commit a murder-suicide with his eldest son via carbon monoxide poisoning. But they were caught, and he was never, presumably he wasn't sent to prison, because if he were actually sent to prison for attempted murder of his oldest child, he wouldn't be a free man, because this is not, it's not like this is taking place 40 years later. So I think what happened was the divorce terms were extremely favorable to Sabrina, justifiably so, and he had a restraining order put against him. So, for the safety of Sabrina and her children. And I think that was like a compromise that was reached. Like, I won't press charges against you, but you're going to get fucked up in the divorce, and you have a restraining order. But in spite of that, he did still have technically child support payment obligations that he, 4 years prior to the events of the film, just stopped agreeing to. But Sabrina just was like, fuck it, I'm just glad he's gone from our lives, and never made a fuss about it. But then he just shows up, barges in. He does imply that he paid for the house that Sabrina and Leonardo are living in, because Leonardo's like, you can't be here. And Pedro's like, don't tell me that I can't enter the house that I bought, or something like that, or that I can't enter my own home. So clearly implying that he bought the house. But then he immediately just starts stripping naked, because he's still covered in the clothing from transporting Uriel. So all of the demonic pus and stuff is still on his clothes. And Sabrina just comes in with her daughter. So Leonardo and Sabrina had a daughter named Vicky, and so it's like a very blended family at this point. But Sabrina comes in and sees him naked, and he's rambling about, like, it's the end times are here, it's happening, the end is happening, the end is upon us. And so just imagine, like, even in this fucked up world where again, frame it like this, everyone knows what rotten are. Everyone knows that demons are real, but everyone just sort of thinks that it's something that almost like 99.9% of the time happens in cities, because cities are have a higher population density and more crime, and so are more attractive to the demons. And so they really think, like, in rural areas it's like not even a thing, basically very rare. And so people are still reluctant when things go weird, or like people get cut in half and stuff like that. People are still, if it's in a rural area, very reluctant to admit, like, okay, the demons are here. They still are like, no, like, that's just normal people being crazy and assholes. So even though he's ranting about the demons finally breaching their region and how everything's going to hell, and because they lost Uriel's corruption is going to continue to spread, because he's a rotten that's going to continue germinating, and now if they can't find him, so they can't stop the pure demon from being born, so they've got to get the hell out of there. But because he's like naked, just stripped dick butt naked in her home. As soon as he walked into the foyer, she's like, "You are fucking crazy." And it's like all of the divorce stress just comes right up. And she's like, 4 years of no child support. Like, I'm calling the police. You're violating the restraining order. You need to get out. How dare you come back into our lives? And so in the midst of all this, and while Leonardo's being pretty useless, their family dog, which is this big ass, like pit bull type dog, but very beautiful, but like this sort of like chocolatey, lighter chocolatey with a little splash of caramel colored big pit bull. Very reminiscent. I don't know if you've seen that dog online. I forgot if its name is like Titus or something like that. But it's this massive pit bull. It's the one that's like 180 pounds or something, and it's kids. Like if you ask to have this pit bull sire puppies for you, it's like $1 million or something like that, because this pit bull is like the pinnacle of pit bulls. The movie Pit Bull was not that special, but I'm just saying it's very reminiscent of that particular dog. Just for reference, for just how like big it is. But while everyone is very stressed and being like, "Pedro, you crazy motherfucker, get out of this house, you can't be here," no one notices that the pit bull like sniffs the pus covered clothing, and the dog immediately seems like disturbed and off in a very quiet way. So it's clear that the dog has been possessed by the demonic vapors. So this dog was clearly like a very loyal and loving dog, but then spontaneously out of nowhere, and this was like another amazing, like not like a true jump scare, but just so shocking. The pit bull like snatches Vicky, the daughter, by the fucking head, and just starts ragdolling the shit out of her. And just the sounds and the way that they portrayed it, it really looked like a child was just getting massacred by a giant ass dog. And like it was just very, very intense. And then the dog runs out the door, still just like with Vicky's whole fucking head in its jowls, and runs down the street and is gone. And so Pedro is like, "We have to go now," but Sabrina is just inconsolable, and she's like, "You have to help us get Vicky back." And it's like, "Girl, Vicky's gone. Like, I'm so sorry. I know you can't tell that to a mother in distress, but it's like, bitch, like you have 2 other kids that have a chance to get through this. Like Vicky, you need to let her go. Cut the cord and let's get out of here." I'm sorry. I know that's not realistic at all, but so Pedro is like, "Fuck this shit." He's like, "I'm getting my kids out of here," while he's trying to assemble Santino and get Jair out of bed. And you can tell Pedro just like, I know it's a very stressful situation, but you can also just tell how like he's trying his best, but he immediately just like grabs Jair and is like, "We have to go, like get up, get out of bed." And Jair is nonverbal and very touch sensitive, like very like on the autistic spectrum. And it's just not working. And he eventually accepts that and realizes that. And he's like, okay, like I have to try to like do this in a calmer way. Like I can't just bulldoze this and make this happen. But while he's collecting his boys, Leonardo tracks down the dog. And Pedro had warned him, like, "Don't shoot the dog. Whatever you do, don't shoot the dog because it's possessed by the demon." Quick break. So a theory that I have 2 theories. So I'm 100% sure the rotten individual is like 100% fully possessed by like a prime higher devil, like a really elite demon. And from there, I'm not 100% sure if it's like extensions of its consciousness extend out and possess additional vessels. Or the alternative theory that I had was that the other people that get possessed but that don't become rotten, the people that are possessed like mentally but that are not mutating and incubating like a new, like obviously incubating like a physical demon, that maybe they are possessed by lesser demons that are in servitude of the prime demon inside of the rotten. This is never explained, but that's just a theory I have. Personally, I could see it either way, but regardless, people aside from the rotten do get overtaken. Okay, so back to the story. So, but it's very obvious that the influence and the proliferation of the demonic possession and corruption is accelerated by murdering the possessed with gunshots. Specifically, gunpowder for some reason is like a catalyst that helps the corruption spread. But Leonardo is still, it's a combination of being too pissed to care and still having doubt about the demons being able to be in their town. And so he just shoots the dog dead. But then Leonardo clearly gets possessed. But then at the same time, Vicky shows up completely unharmed back and just like walks into Sabrina's arms. But it's like really unnerving. The child actress did a really great job because while Sabrina's like, oh my God, my baby, Vicky's like, oh, like daddy's on his way back and he's gonna murder the shit out of you, and he like as soon as he gets back in the truck he's gonna ram you dead with the truck, mom. And Sabrina's like, baby, what are you saying? But she thinks like it must just be stress from somehow getting mangled by a giant ass dog without having a mark on you. But sure enough, Vicky nopes out of there. She's like, okay, I'm done with the hug now. And then as soon as she does, Leonardo just like wrecks Sabrina, just slams her right into a building with the truck. And then he's looking crazy-eyed. While all this shit was happening, Pedro managed to find the keys to Sabrina's like sedan, and he got his two kids the hell out of there. But one thing that was just so disturbing is the crazy look in Leonardo's eyes as he's like looking to the side in Vicky's direction makes, like, again, my personal theory, I have no proof of this, but I think that Leonardo ate his daughter Vicky, like just devoured her, just like scooped her up and just like nom, 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 like totally ate every last crumb of that little girl off screen, of course. But from what context that we learn later in the film and just the way that he was looking, I think he ate that little girl. And even though she was possessed too, in media in general, like demons are shown traditionally as being very like in anguish when ritualistic practices are performed on them, like exorcisms and stuff like that is excruciating to the demon. But as far as like mutilation of their host body, they usually find enjoyment in that, like satisfaction, pleasure even. That's just like a trope of horror demonic media, demonic possession media. And so I think that's what happened off screen. But regardless, Pedro got his two sons the hell out of there. They regrouped with Jaime and their mother, so the abuela of Santino and Jair, and they're just on the road like, okay, we gotta just keep going. And Jaime has this lady friend named Mirta, and they're like, okay, like we'll do a pit stop there, then we're gonna try to like actually get to the city, because they think that if they get to the city that they can find a currently practicing cleaner to come, and then that they can somehow like come back and try to fix all the issues that are happening in their region. But honestly, I think it's just too late. They should just like try to like go find somewhere to be safe, like set up a shelter, like a safe house somewhere completely separate, sort of like what was that movie? Like A Quiet Place. Like just set up a little like farm just somewhere completely off the grid. But during this car trip, the abuela gives a little bit more of an exposition dump. She mentioned so Santino doesn't, and this was a clever way of doing an exposition dump in a movie where we know nothing, but the characters, all the adult characters, know everything that's going on. But Santino, because he's young enough, doesn't understand. He just doesn't know the rules yet. And so the grandma's like, oh, there's actually like a song that they do to teach you about the demons. And so she sings the song to Santino, and then that's how we learn that there are 7 rules. I don't remember all the 7 rules, but that's when we learn stuff like don't shoot them with guns, don't even hurt them, don't use electronics or electronic lights, don't invoke the names of higher devils. And then I guess she was feeling like a badass. She says some of the names. So she's like Azrael, like Lucifer, Beelzebub. And so Jaime and Pedro are like, Mom, shut up. Like, you know the rule. Like, what the fuck are you doing? And she's like, well, I don't even remember the last rule anyway. So, whatever. And then not off screen, but Jair, you see, he's saying like under his breath, it's sort of mumbled the way that he struggles with his communication, but the subtitles confirm he's saying Azrael, 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 but no one else notices. But it's clear in that moment Jair is definitely something's not right with Jair. But then they stop at a gas station because Pedro wants to get Jair an apple ice cream because that's like his comfort. I don't know what the word is for something that like helps a distressed person on the spectrum when they're triggered, but it's like his comfort food. It's something that helps calm him down and center him. But unfortunately, the gas station doesn't have apple ice cream. But during that time, there's a really creepy moment where Sabrina calls. And keep in mind, Pedro saw Sabrina get massacred with a pickup truck. And she answers, she's on the other end of the phone. And he's like out of the car so that no one can hear. And he's just like, I saw you die. Like, what is going on? And she is just going into him, basically being, like classic demonic mocking, taunting, where she's like, the demon is obviously invoking her memories against him and is like, you murderer, like you pathetic excuse of a man, like, you're the reason why, like, I slept with everyone in our town because you were never enough. You were never enough of a man, and you're a poor excuse of a father. Pathetic. I know where you are. I'm gonna get my children back. You don't know what I'm capable of. Like gets really intense. So he just destroys the phone and is he's like halfway to a nervous breakdown, but he's still like, okay, I got to keep it together for my family. Then they go to Mirta. So Mirta lives in a house, sort of like a quiet place. She does not have electricity, so none of the signals or whatever can spread the corruption to her town directly, or to her house directly. But it's still a really nice place, and she's a widow, and she used to be a cleaner. That is sort of explained later, but it's sort of implied right when they get there. But Pedro and Jair, they stay in the car because Jair just doesn't want to leave the car, and he had some bathroom issues. It was a whole thing. But Santino and his abuela are sleeping in a bedroom inside the home after night falls. Mirta, just has reservations about this whole thing, but I think she and Jaime, it's sort of implied, like, so she's an older lady, but still looks really pretty for her age. But it's sort of implied that when Jaime was maybe in his 20s, like early 20s to late 20s, he had an entanglement with Mirta, who was probably already widowed at that time. And so she might have been in her late 40s or early 50s at that time, maybe mid 50s even. But they had an entanglement. And even though nothing ever really became of that, they stayed very friendly. Like they have a very good friend relationship, even though they realize, like, okay, like, it's just we're never gonna be like sexual life partners. So that's why they came, and she was receptive to it. She was actually going to give them some money when they got to the city. She was going to go with them to the bank so that they could get enough money to hire a new cleaner to help them with their demonic not manifestations. You know what I'm saying. But anyway, during all this, there's sort of like a double whammy of fuck shit, because remember, Jair is definitely still possessed, and the demons have some sort of like hive mind. It's either, the way that it works, like I said, is either that the prime demon extensions of its consciousness ripple out and possess other vessels, or that there are lesser demons that are in servitude of the prime demon that's incubating in the rotten. Regardless, whichever way it is, Jair being possessed obviously helped the hive mind hone in on where they are. And the abuela grabbed like an electronic light teddy bear, like a nightlight teddy bear for Santino, and so that's projecting lights into the room while they're sharing a bed. So just a double whammy of shit for the demons to like hone in on them. Electric signals and part of the hive mind being there. And so Sabrina shows up and just like is just totally fucked up, just drenched in blood from head to toe. But she gets Santino out and is like doing like a rockabye baby thing. And Santino, I can't tell if Santino was either possessed or under demonic influence already, or if he just had no idea what the hell was going on. Like maybe he was so tired he just didn't realize, like, oh, this isn't right. Mommy's literally like sticky with blood and smells like iron from all the fucking blood. This isn't normal. So I think Santino, I don't know if he was fully possessed. I think he might have just been like under a demonic spell to make him pliable, because I'm like, what the fuck? But the abuela, she took a sleeping pill, so she wasn't sure right away if it was just an Ambien dream or not. But eventually, like when she woke up enough, she was like, oh my God. And so she got out of the room, went downstairs and was like, to her son, it's like, oh my God, like, I don't know what the fuck I saw, but they're sewing up, they're holding Santino, and I thought it was Sabrina, but I don't, like, that fucking thing's a monster. And so they go up, and Sabrina just like jumps out of the fucking window from the second floor. And this is where I think Santino must have been under some sort of like demonic hypnosis, because he still doesn't scream even when his mom jumps out of a fucking second story window. You know, you would think like even if you were groggy and you were like, oh, okay, like something's off, but you know, my mom's like cradling me. You'd think jumping out of a second story window, you'd be like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, Mom, no. But no, nothing happens. But Jaime and Pedro, they then are like, oh my God, where did she go? Because Sabrina just bolted out of there. This house is like literally in a clearing, and she's just gone by the time they get downstairs. But that's when they decide to all split up. Jaime is going to take a truck, Mirta's truck, and is going to, I can't remember if it was a truck or a car or not. Jaime takes a vehicle and is like, I'm going to track down Sabrina, and if Santino is still alive, I'm going to get my nephew back, your son, Pedro. Like, I'm going to go get him. And Mirta and Pedro are like, we're going to find Uriel's body and put an end to this once and for all. Because Mirta gets out her old cleaner equipment, even though she's long retired. She's like, I'm coming back into the business, baby, and I'm gonna put an end to this shit once and for all. Because the corruption is spreading even to my area. This is personal now, and we have to prevent the end times and all this stuff. It gets very dramatic, very like, you know, all of a sudden the stakes are like sky high. At this time, they do introduce a really unique dynamic, though, because Mirta points out that Jair is obviously, in her opinion, she's like, he's possessed. And she had said that earlier, but they were like, no, he's just like on the spectrum. He's like very, like, he has high care needs, you know, shut the fuck up. He's not possessed. But she says that that this is not like an unheard of thing, and that neurodivergent people, when they get possessed, it's like the demon is stuck temporarily because the demon can't figure out how to operate in a neurodivergent brain. And so it's like all the crisscrossed pathways, or like the brain formation not being a neurotypical, it's like confusing. And so it's almost like a prison for the demon at first while it's figuring out how to slot itself in to operate the vessel. But the sign that she said was that Jair's hands and feet were like super clenched in a gnarly way and turning purple, and that was like the demon exerting effort, while it was trying to assume control of the brain. So they leave for some reason, Jair home alone with his abuela. I guess they assumed like, okay, like the demon, Mirta must have thought like, okay, we still have time. The demon, it'll take that demon a while to figure out how to operate Jair's brain because he's like super high care needs. So she should be safe. I think that was the logic. I'm not really sure. But they left the grandma with Jair knowing he was possessed. Okay, I don't remember the exact chronological order, but basically during this time, a lot of things happen simultaneously. So Jaime finds Sabrina walking slowly down like a country road, and it's just like one of the most cursed images that I've seen in a film. She's got Santino just like bundled up in her left arm, and in her right arm, she's like punched a hole through the top of his skull and is just scooping the inside of his head out with her right hand and just devouring it by the handful. Just like literally scooping him out like a pumpkin. And Jaime has a complete breakdown and just rams her into a tree with the car. Sabrina still doesn't technically, like her reanimated corpse, her possessed reanimated corpse doesn't die, but she's so pinned to the tree that maybe that was like the best case scenario actually, because she's not like, her reanimated corpse isn't dead, but she ain't going no damn where. And so I think that that's what protected Jaime from getting possessed, because it's more like she's stuck there, so the evil's still contained. And obviously for him, it was like a way of getting retribution for Santino. Santino, he never reanimates. So as far as I'm aware, the consumption of the inside of his skull caused so much damage that there was no way for the demon to either spread into him to reanimate and control him, or for a lesser demon to like join the hive mind and control him. He was done. He was out. So that's poor Santino's fate. Pedro and Mirta, they have a little bit of a monologue where she talks about her past. That part got a little weird because she was like thinking like all these dominoes fell to bring me back to this moment, because she theorizes, at least I think this is what happened. I was pretty sick when I watched the movie, so I had sick brain, so I might be having false memories. But I think she thought that the same prime high demon that's germinating in Uriel's rotten body might be the same demon that once like cost her husband his life, and that's why she went into retirement, because she and her husband were like a cleaner duo. And they were doing that as atonement because they had originally been operating a church that was like a scam. That's another interesting thing about this film, that it's just like an established rule that you just have to be like, okay, that's just how this world is in this cinematic universe. Christianity is defunct. Pretty much every major religion has lost most of its congregation loyalty, because none of them were ever effective at controlling or combating the demonic influence at all. Exorcisms don't work. No rituals, no faiths have any effect on the rotten or even the peripheral hive mind, non-rotten possessed demons. It just doesn't do anything. But she was running a church where she would pay actors to pretend to be possessed or even rotten, and they would pretend like their Christian beliefs were effective at exorcising and purging the evil and saving them, but it was all a scam. But they built up a very loyal and a very high revenue following in that way. But then one day they had an actual full-on rotten possessed show up, and they thought it was just an actor, but they did their whole spiel, but then it just like barfed blood on everyone, and they realized like, and then it started attacking everyone, and they realized like, oh my God, this is real. This is spread to our church now. Like we got to get out of town. But then in that time, they were taught the shamanistic practices that apparently actually work for defeating or containing the evil. So it's this like really bizarre thing where it's like all these dials with all these like ancient runes on them, and these like dials like interlock like clocks and twist all these mechanisms and knobs and levers, and then all of it comes to an end point where it's just like this ornate shamanistic dagger, and that's supposed to be like what actually can destroy the evil and prevent the birth of the demon. It can abort the pregnancy, so to speak. So she does her exposition dump about her backstory, but then this is where the movie really fell off the cliff for me, because it's been such like a tight story so far, but then when it gets to preventing the birth of the prime pure demon, it falls into that trap that I'm not a huge fan of like, if we don't act now, then the fate of the world is at stake. Like, I'm just not a big fan of that, especially because you could tell that they were very limited with how they were able to go about that high stakes third act. Because, again, there was a little bit of a context dump where Mirta's character is like, we have to go to the small local rural school. And she just is like, the demons love children, and children are predisposed to being hypnotized and like becoming acolytes of the demons and transformed. So if Uriel's anywhere in the fucking 300-mile radius, he's gonna be at this small local rural school, just cause kids. So let's go there right now. And so then the big showdown, to prevent the end times, is just at this like this tiny as hell schoolhouse where the kids, I can't tell if the kids were full on possessed or just corrupted and mentally corrupted into becoming like willing acolytes of the demons. I think it might be a mixture of both. But the kids, they're not violent at first and not attacking. They're clearly like deceptive and playing mind games to fuck around with Mirta and Pedro, but they're not like just like using their numbers advantage to rip them apart right away. So I don't know exactly what the plan was from the demons, other than maybe to just have fun playing with their food. But I was so pissed because Mirta and Pedro, they didn't bring the fucking equipment inside. Granted, there was no direct consequence from that, but that would have been an opportunity for them to get split up, because basically they search the schoolhouse. The demons play more games where when they can't find Uriel's corpse or Uriel's rotten body, they're like, okay, maybe he's not here after all. So the kids start coming at them like, he's at my dad's house, Uriel's at my dad's house. But then a girl's like, no, he's not at that boy's house. He's at a cottage up the road the other way. You have to go there. And the one girl in particular is pretending like she doesn't want to be corrupted by the influence, by the demonic manifestation, but that's just part of her act. But Pedro just starts beating the shit out of the little girl who was like, he's up at the cottage. And it is one of the craziest things I have ever seen. Like, I shouldn't have laughed, but I was like, oh my God. Like, this movie, like just the immediate drop off in tension from the Santino getting his fucking head scooped out like a pumpkin to now Pedro is just like beating the shit out of this little girl. I was like, it's the third act curse. The movie has just kind of fallen off, and it's just so hard for movies to really stick the landing on that third damn act. I don't hold it too much against this movie because I think it's very rare for third acts to really just like pull everything together in a way that leaves you haunted. Like I said, instead of really sealing the distress and feeling haunted, the third act is where the threads just started ripping apart, and all the amazing build up for me just started to unravel and just like disintegrate before my very eyes. And because then, up until now, it's sort of been understandable. Like, even though people know the rules, they're still relatively helpless to what's going on. But at this point, it went full on dumb horror tropes. So one thing that happened, so they finally find Uriel buried underneath the stage in like the school gymnasium, but he's like covered in all the corpses of the teachers and the parents of the kids that are now acolytes of the demon. And this just, I was like, oh my God, the dysfunction of this scene. I was like, what the fuck? You can't be serious. So Mirta starts putting the thing together. It looks like something that Lara Croft would be finding out of Tomb Raider, like the Dagger of Destiny, stuff like that. Putting all these dials together, and Pedro's ripping up floorboards with a hammer, and the kids are in there, and it's just like a clusterfuck going on. He gets 4 boards up, and he finally finds Uriel's head. And she is like, we're running out of time. Like, I've never seen a rotten that's gone this advanced before. Like, God only knows what's going to happen. But then she starts like putting pressure on him. She's like, you have to get Uriel out of there. Get him, pull him up out of the boards. Get him up out of the boards now. I have to stab him in the nape of his neck. So you have to lift him up out of the stage. Pull him up now. Now. There's no more time left. You have to lift him up now. Get him up out of the stage. And I'm like, Mirta, I swear to God, like, you can see that Uriel is at least 400 pounds and Pedro is this skinny twig motherfucker. How the fuck is Pedro supposed to lift Uriel up from out under the stage? That you like, what are you even talking about? Like, it was just so obvious that the only thing that could have worked is for Pedro to sort of like try to like scrunch down Uriel's head, because Uriel was sort of like laying down. So maybe he could have gotten Uriel like leaning upward slightly and then scrunch the head down. And then maybe Mirta could have like gone behind with the dagger mechanism thing. And then, because she kept saying like, I have to stab the nape of his neck. And like obviously they could have tried to like, you know, get him in position and then move the daggers so that they could like interlock. But for her to like be ranting at him to like get him out from under the stage, maybe it was just a poor subtitle translation. By that point, I was so sick tired, I wasn't even trying to like take in the Spanish and read the subtitles. I was just pure subtitles. So it might have been an error in translation, but when I was watching it, I was getting so pissed at Mirta, because I was like, how is this 150-pound man supposed to lift this gargantuan creature out of the stage by himself? But then, so I was pissed at Mirta over that, but then I got so pissed at Pedro because the classic trope of don't split up. So the girl that he beat the shit out of in the parking lot, who is a known liar and deceiver, was using the same old trick where she's pretending like, I don't want to be, like, I'm trying to break free of the demonic corruption. I don't want to be an acolyte of the demon. So she's like being all like, there's an axe in the room just outside of the auditorium where you can get the axe and then you can bust open the floorboards and it'll be easier to get more access to Uriel, and then you can like get to the nape of his neck easier because maybe you can like roll him over. And oh my God. So even though this bitch is an established acolyte liar, Pedro just puts the hammer down and starts walking towards the door. And the entire time Mirta's like, no, Pedro, no. Like, Pedro, you know that she's under the like influence of the demon. You know she's an acolyte of the demon. You know she's a deceiver and a liar and a manipulator. And you don't leave me here alone, Pedro. You can't leave me here alone. Don't leave me with the children. And he just walks right out of the room calmly, as if like all's peachy, and sees that there's no fucking axe in the emergency fire axe case. It's empty, and he's just staring at it for a few seconds in disbelief, like, oh my God, the acolyte of the demon that has already lied to me like 2 or 3 fucking times. I can't believe she lied to me about the axe. And so while the gears are turning in his head over like, I can't believe that the 3-time liar lied to me a 4th fucking time. The doors get locked on him, and the kids lock the door shut with some wire. And this is what I said earlier, the only weak acting moment, and it was off screen. Mirta, the actress, so we don't see her getting jumped by the kids, but it was just a little weak. It was just a little weak because she's like, I know. It was literally like on that level. Like instead of like a guttural, like throat splitting scream, it was like, no. And then Pedro, so she gets taken out, and Pedro is just like, he busts open the glass part of the door so then he can undo the wire, and then he goes back in and he sees her face is fucking caved in because they took the hammer, because he didn't even take the hammer with him. He just left the hammer there. And so the kids have hammered her face in and they drag her out of the room, and it wouldn't even matter anyway if it like, what I was saying is she never taught him how to use the shamanistic, ritualistic dagger gear machine. So it wouldn't have even mattered if the machine was intact and she got taken out. Like, he still would have been pretty helpless. He could have tried to stab the thing in the neck, but there were like all these knobs and rune orientations that had to be in just the right way, and she was definitely not quite done, so he would have been fucked regardless. But Pedro was double fucked because the machine is just destroyed, and Uriel leans up out of the stage and is just like laughing at him and mocking him and just taunting him and beckoning him to kill him. And Pedro's just so over it. He's so over everything. And so he finally just takes a larger piece of the machine and just caves Uriel's head in, his whole face in, and then just collapses onto the gym floor. But then off screen, the pure higher demon emerged and is basically like a young boy between 11 and 14, covered in blood from erupting out of Uriel's rotten shell. And the demon doesn't even kill Pedro because it realizes, like, with all that Pedro's gone through, the worst hell that Pedro can suffer through is to live, because like pretty much his whole family except for his brother at this point has died horrifically. So all he does is the newly born demon, which I think was Azrael, sort of like marks him with some of the blood on his fingers, and that blood never comes off. Like, even when Pedro tries to take a shower, it's like he's like not cursed but marked by the demon as a way to like mock him and taunt him for his failures for the rest of his life. But really interesting visual. The pure higher demon, which I think was Azrael, is walking in the forefront while all the kids from the school are following behind him. But it's like this beautiful, gorgeous sunrise. And so it sort of gives this twisted mirror parallel of Jesus walking like in a beautiful field at dawn with his disciples following in tow, but like the twisted, fucked up version of that. I think that the demon, I imagine it chose the form of the child because in the lore of the film, children are naturally drawn to be acolytes of the demon. And so I don't personally think those kids were like full on possessed by lesser demons or even like full on possessed by an extension of Azrael's consciousness. I think that it's just like they become like sucked into the aura, and they just like willingly become acolytes because they're tempted by it. And so I think that Azrael is reborn as this child between 11 and 14 because it's a form that will allow him to gain the trust of more children. But then my theory is that Azrael's physical form would grow up and eventually stabilize at an age of like maybe like 25 years old, maybe 27 years old, where it would be at its prime form, where it could then like influence a cult of some sort, and the children that it accumulated when it was in its newborn form will grow up with it. That's just my opinion. Sort of like that would be sort of inspired by the way that the Omen franchise went, where it's like, like the newly reborn demon will eventually be like a really really attractive, like 25 or 27-year-old who is gonna, be an influential political figure or something. But the point is, because they failed to stop the pure higher demon from being born in a physical body out of Uriel's rotten form, because they failed, it's presumed that the end times have arrived, and this is gonna, hearken the end of everything. While all of this was happening, Jair, his poor abuela, she just gave up, because he walked into the room suddenly, just like having full motor control and just being fully conversational, like a non-neurodivergent teenager. And he was just like, "Hey, grandma, do you know where the ice cream is? Like, I think I might enjoy having some. Do you want some too? Blah, blah, blah." And something that would be endearing if, he had been communicative his whole life, but because he was nonverbal, high support needs, the grandma just knows, oh God. And he, puts a hand on her shoulder in a way, what should be a comforting way, but it's just so fucked up. And that was a good, okay, in the third act, that was a good little segue of oh, you're doing so much with so little. I did appreciate that. But then the film ends with Jaime discovering Uriel's younger brother, and he reveals that he had been under demonic possession. I don't know if he was still possessed and it was the demon revealing these things, or if the boy was freed once the pure high demon was born into the world. I'm not 100% sure, but regardless, Uriel's younger brother reveals that he's the one that shot and then murdered the original cleaner that was bisected, and that he ate the top half of that cleaner, and that the night before he ate his mother, Maria Elena. And then he basically tells Jaime, and basically the same thing happened to your mom. I didn't eat your mom, but your mom got devoured too. Sorry. So then Jaime is rushing back to the house where they were all staying. I think it was still at Mirta's house. I'm not 100% sure. But Pedro is with Jair, and I don't know why he didn't. Maybe he thought his mom went for a walk or something. I don't know why he wasn't Mom, where are you? But regardless, he's just feeding Jair some ice cream. And Jair, I think it was pistachio, which is not the apple that's his favorite. But regardless, Jair's eating it. I don't know if Jair was released at this point, or if Jair was just still possessed but pretending to now be to have all of the difficulties. But he starts choking, and Pedro comes over and it's helping him and clearing out his mouth and throat. But then he starts pulling hair out, and then just this big clump comes out, and it's basically grandma's entire scalp just comes right out, along with her necklace. And it's clear Jair just ate her up. Every last crumb, just nom 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 nom. She I don't know physically and mechanically how that works, because Jair still looked very skinny. But yeah, Granny's gone. Granny is in the digestive tract. And at that point, I see, because this is where the movie still leaves so many open-ended questions, because I don't know if that means that Jair was freed when the apocalyptic physical demon was born, or if Jair is still possessed, and if Pedro might have taken him out with an edged weapon to put Jair out, to end his possession, but also just out of despair of losing his mother, and in a way losing his remaining son as well. Pedro comes out of the house alone and just falls to his knees and starts screaming, just guttural screaming. And Jaime's trying to comfort him, but Pedro has just lost his mind. He's at full emotional breakdown, just screaming into the sky. And then the movie ends. I know, that was a lot. That was a fucking lot. And I'm sorry for all the cursing, but sick brain. I'm just really tired, and my throat hurts, and my face hurts, and my lungs hurt. It's been one of those weeks. And I keep choking on mucus. But after finally getting to the end of that retread of the plot, I stand by my 7.5 rating. I think that the film starts off so strong, but just really falls off the cliff. Like I said, with that third act, a lot of movies do. It's so hard to execute that. Another thing, just a little nitpick. This is just a personal thing. So I understand that it was just sort of like a narrative choice for this film to have it where the viewer hops in knowing nothing, but for the most part, all of the adult characters understand the mechanics of the demonic possession, the rotten, the proliferation of the corruption, etc., etc., etc. So, I still had a few issues with that, though, because I think my biggest issue was because it was sort of established in the film that this is all established lore amongst the characters. I felt like there were still so many open-ended questions and so many things that the characters seemed to not understand, and hence we were left with unanswered questions. And it just seemed a little discombobulating to me. Like I just had a hard time believing if this sort of possession is a commonplace thing in society in this universe, how is Uriel the first one? Or I don't know if they ever said he was the first one to ever fully give birth to a physical higher demon, but like the vibe that I was getting was that he was the first one to go full term. And so there was just a lot left to the imagination of like, what does that mean? What really are the stakes of the demon being reborn in physical form? And real quick, I do want to say, I don't know if they put in special contacts for the boy that played Azrael in physical form, but they were really, if the boy either has like very striking and like in an almost scary way eyes, or the contacts were very subtle. But I loved his eyes because they were like really creepy, but they weren't like green, yellow, or red. It was just this really light shade of brown with just like a tiny bit of orange, but it was enough to be natural, but just like maybe it was the lighting or something. But I was like, that boy has very striking but very, very like predatory eyes almost. Very interesting. Anyway, I can't harp on that too much, though, because honestly, sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. And it's one of those things where I think it's sort of almost like a satire of how the world actually operates, when it's like we know that so many horrible things are happening. Sort of like this is getting back to the thematic element from the non-spoiler section. Where the director and writer was talking about how some of the thematic inspiration was how the inefficacy of bureaucracy, the failure of bureaucracy, and how people are sort of like left to their own devices. And oftentimes we know that these horrible things are happening in the world. We know the potential for so many horrible things to happen. It's like we don't act. It's like we're always thinking like, well, at least it's not me, at least it's there, not here, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, in this case, it's just to the extreme where it's like, okay, but we're talking about legitimate demonic entities, like just being a part of the established reality. And that if the higher level ones that are literally gestating inside of a rotten shell, like what, I don't know, you know what I'm saying though, where it's like it's sort of presented where it's like, oh yeah, like all the lore is already established, but at the same time that almost makes it feel like God, I'm so sorry, I have such sick brain. In movies, I like not having I like it sometimes when I have unanswered questions, when the whole thing was a mystery for myself and the characters. You know what I mean? Where it's like no one really knew exactly what was happening or how to get through it. And so it's like, even if like a character survived by the end, but it's like there are just still so many unanswered questions of like, what was that? What happened? Like, what, oh my God. You know what I mean? I can relate to that, and I appreciate that sometimes. I appreciate having those unanswered questions and the ones where there's so much left to interpretation. But in this film, it's established that there is lore, that worldwide there is a system. They even have like government entities that are devoted specifically to addressing the physical gestating demons inside rotten shells. And so with that being the established lore, that everyone, everyone knows what's happening, then I still just was left wanting for more, in the sense that I didn't like having so many unanswered questions when it's like, oh my God, like even if the point is the government agencies suck and they're ineffective and they leave people to their own devices to deal with this horrible shit, it's like, it just I just didn't like not knowing the mechanics of how all the demons were working, when it's like, okay, but there somewhere in this film there's a government agency that's full of like scientists and stuff that have perfected the shamanistic ritual, and like within the canon of this universe, they would be able to answer the questions, the little questions that I had, like are the secondary possessions, are they part of like a hive mind, the extension of the primeval consciousness, or are they lesser demons that are subservient of the demon incubating in the rotten, and they're like serving, trying to get that one to be born. Like those are the types of questions where if a movie is established as being lore heavy and already having all the answers, then I just want to know all the answers. It's like a tease. But anyway, sorry for that ramble. I'm not going to repeat anything else I said. I feel like I've been pretty balanced, talking about pros and cons. I do want to give special attention to the prosthetics. I think that the prosthetics, the little blips of CGI and camera panning and whatnot, like they were able to make some really shocking moments. Like I said at the beginning, especially the scenes of violence inflicted on children, it was so unsettling, and they were able to accomplish so much with so little. Yeah, I don't want to start talking in circles, but it just really disintegrated a little bit in the third act for me, but that doesn't take away from how strong acts 1 and 2 were. And so for that reason, I'd still say I would recommend watching this film, especially if you're a horror fan or aficionado or just someone who appreciates horror, enjoys it. This is definitely essential viewing, at least in terms of the last couple of years, but I still wouldn't put it in the same level as stuff like Hereditary or the Babadook, where I feel like movies like that did a better job sticking the landing in the third act, because they stayed a little bit tighter, like they didn't try to raise the stakes almost incalculably, but then have those high stakes juxtaposed with a very low stakes environment that just sort of clashed, in my opinion. Like that was the issue that I had, that suddenly this became we have to fight to save the world, and it's in this shitty little schoolhouse that was obviously a budget constraint. You know what I mean? Things like that just broke the immersion for me. But with that said, I still think that, compared to The Exorcist Believer, when Evil Lurks reigns supreme any damn day of the week. I do want to do a video on Exorcist Believer. I need to rewatch that before I do a deep dive on that, because that movie almost had me pulling my hair out. I was so pissed watching that movie, because I had seen some negative reviews, but honestly, sometimes when I see negative reviews, that makes me want to root for a movie more, where I'm like, it can't be that bad. It can't be that bad. But by the end of it, I was like, that fucking movie was worse than any negative review that I saw, like every negative review that I saw, even that trashed Exorcist Believer, I was like, that still was too generous. So I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to dish some dirt on that film, but hopefully I'll be recovered before I eventually build up the strength to tackle that project. But anyway, thanks for listening, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you disagree with any of my theories or agree or had alternate theories, would love to discuss some of them with you. And sorry about my sick voice, sick brain. I know I'm extra rambly for sure. Definitely next time I'll try to be more focused and not be as, in and out with my voice. And let me know some other movies other than Exorcist Believer that you'd like to talk about or hear me talk about. I know that I go on and on and on sometimes, and sometimes I talk too slow because it's like I'm trying to be so careful about what I'm saying. I'm going to try to overcome that and just try to talk more fluidly with less care about let me make sure that I know exactly what I'm trying to say. Sometimes you just need to go for it. I'm going to try to go for it more. But at the same time, I have heard some people tell me that I'm very relaxing to listen to, and that I can be like a good, soothing, like right before bedtime type of voice to listen to. So if for no other reason than to help you get some Z's, would love to have you, and would love to have you stick around and subscribe. And I'll catch you next time. Bye.